The Bike Club podcast is a collaboration between Beth Karan and Akshaya Parthasarathi.
The Bike Club podcast acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land we record on. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Welcome to Bike Club, a tech podcast crafted by the girls for the girls. Our mission to elevate, educate, and explore the exciting world of technology.
So tune in and remember, the first rule of Bike Club is to talk about Bike Club. Hello, I'm Beth.
And this is Akshaya.
And welcome to Bike Club episode 2. We are so excited to have you here with us for another episode. This is my first episode that I'm going to be reporting on someone. But first, Akshaya, what is our second rule of Bike Club? I don't actually know what it's going to be, so I'm excited to hear.
Oh, yeah. Took a little bit of thinking for this one. So rule number 2 of Bite Club is to stop over apologizing. This one's a rule that I think I personally drew from my own experiences. And it's more relatable to people very early on in their career. I feel like it's easy to come across many situations where you're trying to ask a question, just trying to navigate through your work day, and you apologize quite a bit. And I've read quite a bit of articles that talk about how over apologizing can actually lead to someone taking you a lot less serious. We're not saying that you shouldn't apologize, especially when you're, deleting massive chunks of data or just
if you've actually done something wrong, then
Yeah, own up to it if you've done something wrong, but stop doing it when it's not necessary, especially when you're just doubtful about a concept, or when you're expecting a reply, or when you just need to remind someone that you're following up with something. Try to break that habit, especially with positive gratitude. Maybe just say thank you for waiting for me instead of saying sorry for wasting your time or stuff like that. So yeah,
that's a big one that I've had to switch in my language, is say thank you instead of sorry, because it's so easy to constantly be like, oh, I'm so sorry, or when you're asking a client for something, or you're just getting something from your boss and you're like, I'm so sorry. It's you don't have to be sorry, it's fine.
You don't. Yeah, you're just naturally curious, and that's a really good trait to have. So that's rule number 2 of Bike Club, is to stop over apologizing. Now over to you, Beth, to take us through the episode.
Okay, wonderful. I think that's a great second rule. Very happy with that. So today I'm going to be talking about a woman called Katie Bouman and her contribution to the Event Horizon Telescope project. So this was the project that took the first image of a black hole, and you've probably seen it floating around on the internet. It's a very famous image. It's very cool. This is the topic I went with because my background is astronomy, and I was kind of we're starting this tech podcast. I want to spend my first episode just nerding out about something that that I really love.
Exciting.
So I basically,
No, that's a wonderful topic, though.
I just picked a topic that I want to yap about for a long time. So you're welcome. Also, sorry. Actually, no, I'm not sorry, because we're not apologizing for no reason anymore.
Yes.
Okay. It should be good. I'm very excited. As with last episode, I'll link a couple of sources in the show notes. So I've kind of got a few sources of increasing complexity. So there's a few just videos on YouTube, TED Talks, but then there's also Katie's full PhD thesis is available online if you want to read it. It is quite technical. Even I was I don't know what's going on, but it is a cool summary if you want to go and have a look at that. So I'll link that there.
Just some light reading.
Just to read on the train or in the bath. I don't know. Bit about Katie, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. I hope it's Bouman. I mean, I highly doubt she's going to be listening to this, but Katie, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, I'm really sorry. So she studied electrical engineering at the University of Michigan and graduated in 2011. So she's quite young. She's only in her 30s now, I think.
Oh my God, yeah.
So very much a bit closer to our age, this one, which is pretty amazing. And she graduated with the highest honors of grades. In Australia, it would be a HD.
Of course, yeah.
Yep. So then she went to MIT and did her master's there. And she did her PhD at MIT as well. And during her PhD is when she first started working with the Event Horizon Telescope. And I'll give a bit more context about what that is later. But yes, that's where she worked. She received her PhD. Her thesis title was Extreme Imaging via Physical Model Inversion, Seeing Around Corners and Imaging Black Holes, which
is
a very cool PhD title. And basically, it outlined this algorithm called CHIRP, which is a computational imaging technique which allows images to be constructed with high accuracy from a small amount of data. So it's basically like you have a small amount of input data, but then you can construct an image of whatever you're trying to take a picture of using these computational methods.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'll get into what that looked like a bit later, but yeah, so that was her PhD thesis, and then she went to Harvard. So she's just ticking off all the major like
Yeah, the
MIT,
Ivy Leagues.
Harvard.
Yeah, just MIT,
Yeah.
Ivy Leagues. Yeah.
She was a postdoctoral fellow there for 2 years, and after 2 years, that was when the photo came out. So 2019, she started there 2017, 2019, that first photo was produced by the Event Horizon Telescope team, including her, and her algorithm was one of the fundamental parts to actually constructing the image.
Oh, wow. So that's just 2 years into her thesis,
Into her
right?
postdoc, yeah. So she
Into her
finished her thesis
postdoc.
in 2017 and then postdoctoral research.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
amazing.
cool.
And there's this famous photo of her where she's kind of sitting in front of her laptop and you can see the black hole image on her laptop and she's kind of got her hands over her mouth and she's like, "Oh my gosh." And it went around the time that this black hole image came out and everyone was like, "Wow, that's so
Yeah.
cool." There's a lot of media attention around it and there was a lot of positivity, but then there was also a lot of backlash that came, which was honestly not surprising if you've been a woman in tech before. But at first,
Mm-hmm.
everyone was like, wow, she's so amazing. What a great role model, all the things that they should be saying. And then people were saying, oh, she's trying to take credit for this whole project. And there's like all these other people
Of
involved.
course.
And she was never doing that. Like it was just a cool photo
Yeah.
of her seeing the image for the first time and being excited about it. So I don't know. I won't
Mm-hmm.
get too much into that, but I thought that was an interesting thing as I was reading because I hadn't even
No,
realized that there was all
yeah.
this, yeah, like anger around it and like people just struggle to see
It's
women
quite
succeed.
surprising. Yeah, it's quite surprising how, I think it goes back to the basis of this podcast, which is, remember I was talking to you about the Matilda effect, where women are
Yeah.
constantly just erased from science and their contributions are erased from science. So even if we do want to try to change it over, I think it's going to take a lot of push through in societal in
Yeah.
just like societal pressure just to get your name out there. But
Yeah.
I'm sure Katie didn't want to take the whole credit for it.
No, and she never did that. Like it was just
yeah.
a good photo and and she said, this was a huge team effort and all these people did all this stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
that just tells
Yeah.
you a bit about the state of society and the internet
Women
as
in
a
STEM.
whole.
Yeah.
But she powered through it. She's amazing. She then went and worked at Caltech, so ticking off another major tech university in the
Yeah.
US, and she became a professor in 2021. That's where she is now. She's still lecturing there, and she teaches in computer vision and machine learning. And she runs the research group called Computational Cameras. And I'll link their website as well in the notes, which focuses on integrating algorithms and sensors to image the invisible. So it's sort of a research group of PhD students, master students, who are sort of continuing the work that she's doing of taking computational images of these really hard to image things.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, so that's a
So, I
little
mean,
bit
yeah, I
of
suppose
bio.
there's a lot. Yeah, sorry for cutting you off, but I
No,
suppose there
you're
are a
good.
lot of things in space which we still haven't seen,
Yeah.
despite the amount of effort and money that's been put into it. So,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
I think she's doing some amazing work that way.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So that's a little bit about her. And then I thought I might give a bit of background to the Event Horizon project before I sort of get into the actual algorithm, just so
Yeah.
that you can have some context around what they were trying to do, because it's a little bit hard to understand if you don't have an understanding of what they were even doing. First of all, why would we want to take an image of a black hole? First of all, it's really cool. Um, and
Yeah.
it's just sick.
The end.
But also, it verifies some really fundamental things about our understanding of gravity and the universe. So, Einstein's theory of general relativity basically says that space is kind of like a trampoline, and when you put stuff on it, it like bends the trampoline. Like if you
Bounces
put a
back.
bowling ball on a trampoline, it'll like sink down around the bowling ball, right? So Einstein kind of said like space-time is like a sheet. It's like that. And anything
Right.
really heavy will create like a dip in it. And a black hole is like the heaviest thing in the universe, right? Like it's the densest, heaviest kind of object you can get. And so a black hole, the dip that it makes is really deep. It's like a really deep well in space.
Okay.
The thing with a black hole is that any matter that comes near it will fall into it. It's like how if you're like going along a flat surface and there's suddenly a giant hole, you're going to slip in. And since light has mass, which is a crazy thing all on its own, like I don't even know how that works, but light does have mass. And so light can get sucked into the black hole. And so basically a black hole is this big sink that just like eats everything that comes past it.
And it just leads to nothing.
It leads to nothing. Well, we don't know. It leads to nothing. Leads to another hole on the other side of the universe. Who knows? But it eats light. And so to image something, you have to take a picture of the light that's coming off it, right? Like you need to see photons coming off the thing into the camera. It's pretty much impossible to take a photo of a black hole, like by definition. The solution to this is that light that comes past the black hole, but not close enough that it falls in, kind of like skimming something around like, have you ever seen those visuals of an asteroid going past a planet and it'll kind of like bend into the planet but then keep going? It like changes the path, but it doesn't crash into the planet because it's not close enough. Yeah, so you can kind of think of each particle of light like that. So it kind of comes close to the black hole.
Close to the black hole, okay.
And the black hole like bends its path and changes its direction, but it's not so close that it falls in. And the point at which it would fall in is called the event horizon. So that's where that term comes from. So once it crosses the event horizon, it means that it's going to fall in. If it's outside that, then it'll just get bent around.
So just like a nice little safe zone.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's like your path might get a bit messed up, but you're going to continue on. You're going to live your life. You're not going to be eaten up by this pit, basically.
That's cool. Yeah.
So the cumulative effect of that is that all this light that's coming towards the black hole but not falling into it basically creates like a halo effect around the black hole because the light gets pulled towards it and then keeps moving like past it. And so you get this kind of like donut of light. So if you've seen the black hole image, that's kind of what it looks like, right? It's like a donut of kind of glowing with just blackness in the center. And so what we're actually, what they're actually trying to image is this halo effect that goes around the black hole. So that's what they're trying to do. It's still pretty hard, but they did find a way to do it. And in Katie's own words, she said, if we come together and think creatively, we can do something that should be impossible, which I think is such a great quote. And in our next segment, I'll explain how they ended up doing it.
And kudos to Katie. I mean, this is quite literally the impossible. And
it
opens up so much more. Yeah, it opens up so much more about rather than what we know, the doors to what we don't know about space, which is still way too much.
Yeah, exactly. So as I was saying in the earlier section, there's a lot of challenges to taking a photo of a black hole. So the first one is just that it eats light and you need light to take a photo. And so that's already a challenge, but we do have that halo that we can take. The next issue is that even though we have that little halo around the black hole, it's really far away. The black hole that is closest to us is the one that's at the center of our galaxy. And even that is 53 million light years away.
Okay, thank God for that.
Yeah, you're not going to fall in anytime soon, don't worry.
Yeah, cool.
But the light from that black hole, or from around it, I guess, takes 53 million years to reach Earth. So it looks tiny. Like that's what a light year is. And so it's a long way away. Okay. So in astronomy, there's this concept where the smallest thing that you can take a picture of with the telescope is inversely proportional to the size of the telescope. So basically, the bigger the telescope is, the smaller the thing you can take a picture of is. If we plug all the numbers of how far away the black hole is and how big they expect it to be, etc., into that formula, you would need a telescope that is 13,000 kilometers wide.
That's insane.
Yeah, so just for perspective, the Earth, like the entire Earth, is about 12,700 kilometers in diameter. So you basically need a disc the size of the Earth.
Oh my God. Oh.
Yeah, that's not really going to happen. That's not really possible. So what they did, and this is the main point of the Event Horizon Telescope project, this is what they did, is that they arranged a bunch of different telescopes around the globe. And basically, if you have recordings from different telescopes all around the globe, you can do this thing called interferometry, where you basically knit those images together, and it's effectively like having a telescope that is the same size as the furthest two telescopes are away from each other. So if you put one
Oh.
telescope on each end of the Earth, each, as far away as possible from each other, and then you scatter others in the middle, it kind of effectively becomes like a telescope that
A
is
big
that
telescope.
size. Yeah, which is like crazy and like hurts my brain to even think about the maths of that.
Do we know how many telescopes were used for this one?
Oh, that's a good
Like
question.
the number?
It's in like the tens. I think it's like between 10 and 20 maybe, but I'd have to check
Oh,
that.
okay,
It's not
cool.
that many. It's
Oh,
not that
wow.
many
That's
considering,
because you'd think
yeah.
there would be like way too many involved, but it's quite surprising that it was,
Yeah, so
in the
these are all
tens.
big telescopes. Like they're not
Right.
like, old mate Joe with his telescope out the back
Yeah.
is going to send in data.
Yeah.
Like these are all the biggest telescopes in the world. Um,
Right. Yeah.
and so you can kind of imagine it like if the Earth is like a disco ball. So
Mm-hmm.
imagine it's like a disco ball, except most of the little squares have fallen off. And so it's
Okay.
like a disco ball with some mirrors just randomly scattered throughout the ball. Like if you can imagine that, like a
Mm.
mostly empty disco ball, most of them have come off,
Yeah.
and there's just a few
Yeah.
left over. And then imagine that you point that disco ball towards whatever you want to look at, and then
Mm-hmm.
you take an image of what's on each mirror on that disco ball, and then from those images, you have to construct what it's pointing at.
Oh my God, that's actually a very good explanation.
Yeah, so
That
that's
simplified it. Yeah.
effectively what they did. And it is a fairly simple concept, but it's very hard in practice because it's
Yeah.
you can imagine it's such a small amount of information on each of those little mirrors. You're having to then basically fill in the gaps of, even though the Earth is spinning, and that does help pick up more measurements, because if that same mirror can take a snapshot, as it's rotating
Of every
around,
angle.
you get
Yeah.
a lot more
Yeah.
images, but it's still not the full image. You're still going to miss spots, you're going to miss time periods, you're going to, there's cloud
Yeah.
cover, there's so many different things that will affect your measurements, not to mention just dodgy measurements that have too much noise in them or whatever it might be. So you need to fill the gaps. And basically what Katie did and her team is develop this algorithm called the CHIRP algorithm. And this algorithm uses Gaussian mixture modeling and Bayesian probability to fill in the gaps of the image. So basically, their
Mm.
job was to take in all the data they do have and then
Yeah.
kind of, it's almost like a machine learning model, but it's not quite only a machine learning model, if that makes sense. There's a few different things going on in there. And that algorithm basically looks at those fragments of images and it kind of constructs the most likely explanation for those fragments, because there's an infinite number of ways you could fill those gaps, right? Like you could, in between the images you have, it could be a picture of a horse. Like you don't know, like there's no,
Sure.
it's unlikely, and that's
Yeah.
that's the theory that it relies on, right? It relies on the idea that there's some images that are much more likely than others. It's much more
Others. Yeah.
likely that it looks like a blob with a hole in the
Right.
middle than there's a picture of a horse in the middle of a galaxy.
Okay. Yeah. So essentially, Katie's and like the team's algorithm is trying to fill in what the other pieces of the disco ball would
Yes.
capture. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
saying if we
Okay.
had all of the mirrors still intact,
Yeah. This
what
is
would
what it
our
would
disco
look
ball
like.
see
Okay.
and what would that look like?
Right.
So it uses this thing called Bayesian logic. I don't know if you studied that. You probably studied that
It is.
in
Yeah.
computing, yeah.
It's very familiar. Yep.
Yeah. So basically what it does is it takes prior knowledge and it uses that to inform the model. In the same way that you and I can say,
Mm-hmm.
well, it makes more sense to look like this, but not this. You can tell a computer that
Mm-hmm.
by feeding it images. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem with this is that we don't want to assume, since this is the first ever picture taken of a black hole, we don't want to enforce our
Mm-hmm.
assumptions of what a black hole should look like onto the image and then just get the image out that we like, right? Like if we tell it, it has to look like this, and then it gives us a certain image, it's like, well, it just told us what we wanted to see, right? Like we need to find
Right.
a
Yeah.
way to see if it's actually producing that, or if we're just telling it to
Mm.
produce what we think it's going to look like, because we don't know what it's meant to look like. Because, Einstein's probably right and it's probably a donut, but it could be anything. We don't know. And so we can't assume that in our algorithm, basically. The way they did this is using patch priors. So a patch just refers to like a small chunk of the image. So again, like one of the mirrors on the disco ball. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
patch. And then prior indicates, yeah, you're feeding in existing patches of images that the algorithm can then construct the new image from, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like you're giving it a bunch of puzzle pieces and you're saying which of these puzzle pieces make most sense with the signals that we have for this particular section. And you go through and you do each little chunk one at a time, and then you see what it outputs. And I found this really interesting because she shows in one of her TED Talks, she shows how in order to check that it wasn't biased, they basically input images of, in the first model, they put images of what they think a black hole will look like. And it came out looking like what we think a black hole will look like, as you'd expect. Then they put in images of other celestial objects, so stars, planets, galaxies, other things that we already have images of. They plug that in, and amazingly, it still comes out looking like a black hole. And then what they did is they scoured the internet for just like random stock images, generic photos that they then broke those down into little patches and said, here, make it out of these. And it still came out looking roughly like a black hole.
Oh, okay.
So that's how you test. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That's how you test that it's not just your algorithm that you've said, make me a black hole picture, and then it makes you a black hole picture, because it's not real. That's just a drawing, basically. It's saying, if I feed you different things, will you tell me back the same information? It's kind of like, Akshaya, if I gave you a pile of rocks in different shades and different colors, and then I also gave you a bunch of pencils, and then I also gave you a bunch of book covers. And I said, out of each of these things, I want you to make me a smiley face, right? So, and then with the rocks, you put like 2 dark rocks for the eyes, and you put a curve of the dark rocks for the smile. And then with the pencils, you use some dark colors and color in dark, and then you do the smile in a dark color, and you do like maybe yellow around the outside. And then for the book covers, you do the same thing. You find the darkest book covers to make the face, and then you might fill in with colors around the outside. And so if you gave me a similar shape in all 3 of those, I could pretty reliably say, okay, Akshaya knows what a smiley face looks like, because no matter what I give her, she makes roughly the same image.
Same structure. That makes sense,
for sure. So that's how it works pretty much. And I found that really fascinating. I might include an image of the different tests they did where it comes out with the same image from the different source materials. I might include that on the Instagram post that we do. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. It's very technical. I won't get into like all the different like astrophysics equations they had to like work into it to measure the light and all this stuff, because even I was struggling with that. So, but yeah, that's basically it. I think it's super cool.
Wow, thanks, Beth. I think you broke it down quite literally, like how a 10-year-old would understand that. You did a fantastic job with that one.
Oh, good.
No, I love the little, I love the like the similarities that you bring, because this COBOL is something that I can very easily remember it with now. And the puzzle, just that puzzle annotation that you used also makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
I'm glad.
Thank you.
No worries. Alrighty, so that's an overview of the CHIRP algorithm, of how they took a picture of a black hole. And you might be wondering, how is this possibly relevant to technology today? It is in a lot of ways. Obviously, it's relevant to astronomy imaging going forward, because there's, as you said, there's so many images or objects in the universe that we don't have images of, or that are really hard to image because they're really far away. And so this gives us a method that we can sort of infer what it looks like from less measurements, which is amazing. Doing more with less data is always a bonus. In the same way, you can actually use these for things like medical imaging. So there's been uses where people have used it to reconstruct MRIs. So like where you have multiple scans and they're all a bit blurry, or some of them are missing chunks because whatever you were scanning might have been moving around, or the machine had an issue, and you can put it through this algorithm and it can show you what it was going to look like. And so it can match all these different images. It's sort of, again, piecing together images from missing data, which is pretty amazing. And I even saw something about using it on like micro level, like microbiology, like imaging bacteria and stuff on slides, like, which I was like, that's so crazy. It's like go from like the biggest thing in the universe, imaging a black hole, to like
the tiniest.
I know, isn't that crazy? Because like, they move around and you might have different samples, and so I was like, that's so cool. But one of the other ones that Katie actually outlines in her PhD thesis is the idea of seeing around corners. And so this is the idea that if we go back to our disco ball analogy, if you can imagine that the disco ball is now collecting light that is bouncing around a corner. So it's like the disco ball is taking a picture of a wall, and facing the wall from another direction is something else. Not only are you inferring the structure, but you're inferring it from its reflection on another object, if that makes sense. So, but not like a mirror, like just a random object, like a wall or a tree you're looking at the way that the light is hitting that object and bouncing across to you, and you can construct what's actually behind the tree, which is crazy. It seems like impossible, but
she loves doing the impossible.
Well, yeah, she loves doing the impossible, and she showed in her PhD that it is actually possible, which is amazing. And it's not like you get a crystal clear image, but for the sake of something like putting a camera with this kind of technology on a really dangerous corner on the road, and it can tell you when there's a car coming without even having to get an image, or if it's in a spot where it's really hard to get a clear image, or you can't put a mirror there or something, it can tell you there's an object there. And it might not be able to give you a HD picture of the car, but it can detect that there's something happening. And so it could be used in a bunch of different ways for safety, defense, which was just so mind-blowing to me. It's kind of tangential to the Event Horizon stuff, but it was basically the other application that she used this algorithm for in her PhD thesis. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, the applications seem quite widespread because, as you mentioned, this is the era of self-driving cars, and I think with military, especially just to know what's behind something, or it could be a boon and a bane depending on how you use it, of course. But that's so insane how it could be used.
Yeah, it almost makes me think of those spy movies that you watched as a kid where they have goggles and they put the goggles on and they can see through stuff.
And then that's what's
It's like a live X-ray.
X-ray vision. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, I think. Yeah. So I don't know how far down the track that is in terms of being like a commercialized product. It's very much in the research stages, I think. But yeah, fascinating ideas.
I really do love how I think because Bayesian algorithms, though it's taught when I was being taught that in university, it was taught in the most simplistic ways possible because it was just, statistical measures put together and you just perform a bit of calculations. But it is crazy to think how it expands so exponentially, and the use cases, and how through all of this you have data that's connecting every aspect, from all the way from space to medical to applications, technology. It's so great.
It's pretty amazing. Just this whole idea of inferring something from minimal information in a visual sense, and computational imaging as a whole is quite a new field, like constructing images, making use more of code than of cameras. It just opens up a whole new world, and that's the research group that Katie heads up now in Caltech. There's a bunch of different computational imaging projects happening. So if anyone's interested in it, I highly recommend going on the website, looking at the research they're doing. It's really fascinating.
Well, thanks so much, Beth. That was a really good episode, and I think you, again, as I mentioned, you captured the explanation so simplistic, but also it was so informational.
Oh, good.
So
I'm glad.
Thank you for that.
No worries. You're so welcome.
I can't wait to see what Katie gets up to, because she's so young in her career.
Sky's
at
the
this
limit,
point.
right? It's
it's
going to be amazing. So I'm excited to see who you talk to us about next time.
Next week. I'm also actually quite excited about this. I've already started on my research. And I think we're going to put out some posts on Instagram to see if people can start guessing who the person might be. So I think everybody should stay tuned on that. Give us a follow on Instagram. Just watch out on the socials for what we get up to. Let us know your feedback as always. Leave us comments or send us an email at byteclubpodcast@gmail.com. And that's pretty much it. Do you have anything to add, Beth?
Oh, not really. I just wanted to say that I think one of the greatest things about this story is that it's how interdisciplinary it is. So Katie's an electrical engineer. She's not an astronomer. She's not even a software engineer. And she worked with astronomers, radio engineers, software engineers, and I think that's just an amazing thing, the power of collaboration and lifting each other up. So I hope that's something that we can embody in our podcast going forwards. I think it's really encouraging.
I love that. yeah, I think that's already embodied in the disciplines that both of us come from, like, my background and your background, and we've just like fused it and we've found a common ground to talk about. So yeah, I think we're gonna see a lot more of that in our upcoming stories.
Yep, should be good. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you in 2 weeks with another new episode with another amazing, remarkable woman who's going to take us through her invention.
Beautiful. Thanks, Akshaya.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.